Generally, all of us have about the same sized skull. But why is it that one person's brain sparkles with genius, another person's brain sparkles with pain and suffering and tension and stress and whatever else? All the ugliest things that nobody wants happens in people's minds. So is it a question of higher intelligence? Is it a question of some magical influence from somewhere? Or is it a question of bringing the necessary balance within yourself so that you become available to the magic of life? A skewed intelligence, however smart it may look on the periphery, cannot make this life happen beautifully. Above all, balance is needed, balance on all levels. Otherwise, our very body and our very brain will function against us to a point where the only idea or the only form of relaxation today in the world, either there's sleep or drink or drug, all you're trying to do is to be brainless for a period of time, because brain has become such a nuisance. If you didn't have one, you would be at least peaceful. What took millions of years of evolution to achieve, today has become a nuisance. What is the greatest miracle within this human frame has become a misery manufacturing machine. This human mechanism, which is the most sophisticated instrument on the planet, if you do not pay enough attention to it, if it turns against you, there is nothing here in the world which can save you, because nothing is more sophisticated than this one. Because this is of the highest level of evolution and sophistication. If this turns against you, nobody can save you, I want you to know this. So if this should not turn against you, to know the entirety of what this is, it'll take a certain level of attention. But to bring a reasonable sense of balance into you, it doesn't take much. You're doing a few things basically wrong with life. When I say basically wrong, one thing is for everybody to understand, all human experience is generated from within. Is that so? All human experience is generated from within. So at any time, if you feel happy or unhappy, miserable, joyful, ecstatic, in a state of agony, doesn't matter what happens, what is your experience, pleasantness or unpleasantness, just to know that it's happening from within, and it can only happen from within. You can either take external stimuli or you can create your own stimuli, but essentially it happens from within. This one thing, if it is not grasped, when you feel miserable, if you think it's this one, you're gone. This is not going to work. This one basic fundamental thing is something that almost 90% of the humanity is always doing it wrong. Whenever they feel miserable, they think it must be this one or that one or that one or that one. Now, all human experience is generated from within. If something is feeling unpleasant, first thing is to look at this. What am I doing wrong with this? Am I eating wrong? Am I sleeping wrong? Am I sitting wrong? Am I breathing wrong? Is my heart beating wrong? Something, my very chemistry is wrong. Something is wrong with this, not with that. So this possibility of bringing balance to the system, first of all, is the fundamental nature of yoga, the most basic forms of yoga. The first thing is to bring balance. Once there is balance, then you can build a tower on top of this. If there is no balance, whatever you build will only lead to more trouble. The more basic you are, the better it is. So this is what a whole lot of humanity is seeking, somehow to remain basic. A whole lot of humanity has reduced themselves to a minimal possible thing in their life. If I don't get into trouble, that's good enough. A whole lot of humanity. This is a serious waste of evolutionary work. What has happened on this planet in the last few million years to evolve life from its simplest form to what it is today, just wasting the entire process. And Mother Earth is not going to let you get away with it. You will pay the price. If you try to make life go backwards, it will make sure you pay the price. So instead of trying to do this, that, so many things, first thing is to do something to bring balance. So this is one fundamental thing. We've been talking about this in many forms, but if you want to make the full scope, if you want to make use of the full scope of this body and this brain, of this human possibility, of this consciousness that we refer to as human being, then first thing is this, that you understand and fix it within you absolutely that the quality of my life is entirely my making and nobody else and nobody else. If you fix this one thing, balance will come. Once balance comes, I'm impatient to take you to places where only people with balance can walk, others cannot.
The greatest hindrance, the greatest obstacle for a spiritual seeker is fault finding. When you find fault with people, when you find fault with things, when you find fault with situations, you lose touch with your real self. You lose touch with your divine, conscious nature. Have you ever thought what actually is the root of fault finding? Fault finding is rooted in your mind. It is rooted in your ego. Through fault finding, your ego wants to prove itself right and the other wrong. That's the main motive of the ego. Whatever it does, it just wants to prove itself right. If you have a close look at the activities of your ego, you will find this tendency to be right as the motivating force behind all the actions of your ego. Let's have a look at some real life examples. You are having a little chat with your friend or your partner over a cup of coffee. Everything goes fine for some time. But suddenly, a topic comes up which you feel strongly about. You now try to defend your position at all cost. No matter what, you want to prove yourself right. You want to prove yourself right even at the cost of hurting your friends or your partner's feelings. This is downright insane, I would say. Is proving yourself right more important than your partner's feeling? Tell me. Is proving yourself right more important than your friend's feelings? Just think about it. I know for you, your friend's feelings, your partner's feelings are important. But for the ego, but for the mind, it is not. All it cares about is just to be proved right. So if you want to go beyond fault finding, you need to first observe this behavior in yourself. You need to first notice this pattern of ego in yourself. When you see this pattern, when you recognize this pattern, it will then die down and finally disappear. The only thing that you need to do is to bring the light of consciousness, the light of awareness to this pattern. The rest will be taken care of. When you become aware of any pattern, it then loses its hold over you. It then loses its dominance over you. Look at your life and you will see that your whole life is dominated by these patterns. It's like they are your master and you are always at their beck and call. Stop being the slaves of these patterns now. You are the master. Dethrone the ego and claim your throne. Just recognize what actually is at the root of fault finding. Your ego finds fault not only with people, it can find fault even with the weather. Oh, how hot is the weather! It is awful, says the ego. No, the weather is not awful. It is just hot. Awful is your interpretation. Awful is your resistance to what is. Awful is your state of non-acceptance. The weather is just as it is. You call your friend. He doesn't pick up. You call him again. He still doesn't pick up. How does your ego interpret this situation? The ego is like, oh, look at him. He doesn't even have the decency to call back, and he calls himself my friend. This is how your ego interprets a simple situation like this. It is always finding fault with everything. You just have to recognize it. When you recognize this strong pattern within you, this pattern of fault finding, which has its root in the ego's strong tendency to be right, a great amount of energy will be released. You will feel so relaxed because the stress has disappeared, the stress of being right. When you are proving yourself right, you can see how much stress and tension the ego creates in you. So when you drop this pattern of fault finding, this pattern of proving yourself right, you are at ease, you are at home. You then come in touch with your divine essence. You then come in touch with your divine, conscious, blissful nature. Now, with the recognition of these strong patterns, true balance comes in your life. And this is when you enter the spiritual world. This is when you enter the kingdom of heaven.